Good morning. For the International Cinematographers Guild, we're here on the 6th of March, the year 2000, with that prominent American director of photography, Caleb Deschanel, ASC. Hello, Caleb. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Thank you for being part of our series.
Sure.
Well, we really appreciate you taking some time out to share your story with us. Well, we start off with a little bit of personal history. Where are you from, Caleb?
I grew up in Pennsylvania and Maryland, Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, and then when I was 13 we moved to near Annapolis, Maryland.
Mm-hmm. And were you interested as a youth in photography, or?
You know, when I was about 12, I got a Brownie Hawkeye camera for my birthday, and I started taking pictures with it. And I remember the pictures would come back, and there were just a couple of pictures that I noticed that had a certain special quality that I really liked. And you know, from that I sort of became aware that there were different kinds of pictures. There were good pictures and bad pictures, and then I just became interested in photography from that.
So from when you were 12, you were taking pictures and learning what a lens
Yeah, but I mean
does?
on a real primitive level. I mean, I don't know if you know what the Brownie Hawkeye camera was, but it's this little plastic box camera that...
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a neat little camera, and every once in a while I would get these really nice shots with them, and I would be impressed with them, and then think if I could figure out how to repeat myself when I made good pictures and not repeat myself when I made bad pictures, I'd probably become good at it. So.
Did your parents encourage you or anything?
No, I mean, they never thought about it because my mother's family were all doctors for like 6 generations, so it was expected for me to become a doctor. So.
That was considered your normal course.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't really anything to think about. I mean, when I graduated from high school, I went to Johns Hopkins as an undergraduate, and I was supposed to go to Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia, where my grandfather went, and his father before him had gone for many years.
So you enrolled in Johns Hopkins in what year?
1966.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 1962, and I graduated in '66.
And you went through Johns Hopkins.
Yeah, and I sort of became a renegade about the end of my sophomore year. I was involved with the newspaper, and eventually became the editor of the newspaper at Johns Hopkins. And I was also had a really good friend who was the editor of the yearbook, and I would take a lot of the photographs for the yearbook, and we would always come up with these crazy ideas. And my sister was married to a record producer, musician, a guy named Dick Weissman, and he had a friend named George Pico, who was a still photographer in New York, who had a studio on 36th Street. And in my summers, I would go to New York and I would work for him. And he had a studio. He did mostly, you know, album covers, and he did catalog work and all sorts of things. And they were working in everything from 35 millimeter to 8x10. And they would develop the Ektachrome, and they had a rear screen projection, a front screen projection rather, and you know, to which you could project these 4x5 slides in the background, and you know, so it was a really great training ground for learning a lot about photography.
So you joined up with him?
Well, I didn't really. I mean, I worked as his assistant, and I would do various things. Like, I mean, he eventually would encourage me to take pictures, and sometimes send me out on assignments that he either didn't want to do or decided that I could do, and you know, and I would take pictures, and occasionally I'd take pictures, and the credit would show up on some album cover, and it would say George Pico, and even though I had taken it, but I figured that was part of the learning process of the business. So
you're apprenticing to him then?
Not really. I mean, you know, I was interested in photography, but I never really thought about it being a career at that point. But I did obviously learn something about it, and you know, so when in my junior year I became more and more interested in film, and there were 2 guys who were a year ahead of me at Hopkins, Walter Murch and Matthew Robbins. And Walter has won I don't know how many Academy Awards for editing. He edited Apocalypse Now, and most recently he won 2 Academy Awards for doing sound and editing on The English Patient. And Matthew Robbins is a writer and director. He actually wrote Steve Spielberg's first movie, which was Sugarland Express.
Really?
And has directed a number of movies like Dragon Slayer and a film called Bingo and some other films. So they went out to USC Film School, and when I was in my senior year and you know, I was interested in film school, they encouraged me to come out to USC.
So you finished at at Johns Hopkins, which really doesn't leap to your mind as a big film school. I mean,
no, but at the time there really wasn't any big film school. I mean, when I applied to film schools, there was UCLA, USC, and NYU.
And
that was pretty much it. I mean, now there are hundreds of film schools. I mean, everybody has gotten on the bandwagon of creating filmmakers. But in those days, it was pretty limited, and it was not as popular a subject as it's become.
You're right. It was not considered to be the voice of the people it is now, as it was kind of like a
also there was
culture.
sort of a much more of an understanding that it was really a closed business then, that you really, no matter what you did, you weren't going to get in the business because, you know, there were the unions, there was the you know, the studios, and everybody, you know, who was out there to spoil your desire to get involved in the movie business. So, I mean, I think a lot of that had to do with people being, you know, shying away from it.
But you took a flyer. You said, "Okay, I'm going to go out to USC and follow my friends."
Yeah, yeah, and you know, the great thing about it is that when I got to USC in my first year, because I had a background in photography, and I mean, my background in photography is I knew how to use a light meter.
That sets you apart from other people there.
My friends got me to photograph their films and be involved with them on their films. So right from the beginning, I was, you know, even though I was taking beginning courses, I was actually going out all the time and working with them and their friends on other films. And so I immediately started filming. Actually starred in a film that Matthew Robbins made as well, but that was a short-lived career. So, you know, after the first or second year I was there, a lot of the student films that were being showcased at the end of the year I'd photographed. And then on the basis of that, I had various educational film companies, you know, would call me up, Churchill Films and Dimension Films, as opposed to Dimension Pictures, which I think makes sort of soft-core pornography. It was like an educational film company. And I made documentaries and educational films for them, and through them I got to know Carol Ballard. And Carol Ballard was making educational films at the time, and he had gone to school with Francis Coppola at UCLA. And eventually, based on his short films and his relationship with Francis, Francis got the rights to The Black Stallion and encouraged Carol to direct it. And Carol, because I had worked with him on a couple of educational films, even though I hadn't shot a feature, he asked me if I would like to shoot it, and I said, sure. So.
Well, wait a minute. That's quite a leap for a kid who has just gotten through college a couple of years and got through postgraduate distance.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I graduated. I mean, I went 2 years at SC, and then I went to the AFI.
Oh, you went to AFI?
At the AFI, I did a couple of films and shot other films there. I made a film about Valley Forge, and I made a documentary about trains, and you know, I started doing some commercials and stuff. So it wasn't immediately after that, but I mean, I was still doing educational films, and you know, I really hadn't done anything that big. I mean, it was mostly documentaries and educational films. So, I mean, it's something we were talking about earlier about how there's so many people in this business who don't want to give you a chance to do anything unless they've seen you do it already.
Sure.
So, and we were talking about the fact that, you know, if they haven't seen that exact shot on a reel you've done, they go, well, gee, do you know how to shoot turtles or something?
Yeah.
And, you know, and it's absurd. I mean, if you know how to photograph something, you should be able to figure out.
Or red
how to
cars
do
at
it.
night.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, Carol just trusted. I mean, Carol and I really got along. I mean, we had a relationship when we did the educational films. And Carol's really visually oriented, which was really great for me because he really told stories visually. And so it really wasn't that difficult for me to work with him because even though we would oftentimes disagree, the disagreements were understandable. You know, just be a different point of view about where to put the camera or what, you know, how to shoot something. But in general, we probably agreed about 90% of the time.
Well, it was also an established relationship because of what you had worked with him before on his other projects. So
yeah, and so there was a lot of mutual respect there, which I think is essential to any working relationship with anyone. So
he got this breakout film because he wrote it.
No, he didn't write it, but you know, Francis, who had gotten the rights to it, felt, well, he actually, Carroll had written, actually he did write it, I'm sorry. He and Walter Murch and a guy named Gil Dennis actually wrote the script that was done. You know, then later it was rewritten by Melissa Matheson, who later wrote E.T., and Jeannie Rosenberg. And, you know, through arbitration, they ended up getting the credit. But actually, the original draft of the script that we worked on was actually a draft that Carroll had worked on with Walter Murch and Gil Dennis. So, I mean, it's another one of those, you know, who did what on a movie. But, you know, actually the draft that probably influenced most of the shooting was the one that Carroll actually had worked on. So, but, yeah, I mean, it was based on, obviously, the book by Walter Farley, and that was the key, you know, to the story. And, you know, Carroll had done educational films like Pigs and, you know, Priscilla the Cat, and he had always done films with animals and was somehow able to invest in those animals a sense of their spirit and their, you know, their character in life. And from that, you know, and the fact that at UCLA, I mean, Francis and Carroll Ballard were always vying for the top awards, and it would usually be Francis winning first and Carroll coming in second. So there was always this long-standing both conflict and respect, you know, of each of them for each other. And it turned out to be a perfect project for Carroll, because he was able to make this wonderful children's film that was at the same time, you know, very touching and emotional, but not sappy. I mean, Carroll has a way of doing that. I mean, he did the same thing with Fly Away Home, which I shot many years later. He's able to sort of get in the head of children and animals in a way that I think is really extraordinary.
Well, in a number of ways, shooting adult films, adult themes, is a lot easier than those children's themes, because you have to work on what works for them, and it's tough to get to.
And there's a tendency for, I mean, I think most people think of children's films as being, oh, something, you know, you have to take your children to go see, but I mean, the best children's films are films that go across the spectrum of audiences, and so, I mean, I think it's one of those films that will hold up forever. I mean, first of all, it's a period film, so period films always hold up, or generally hold up better than other films, because they aren't, you don't bring to them some stylistic element that is specific to that particular time. I mean, you see a lot of movies from the late 60s and early 70s, and they just seem so dated and so, you know, incredibly, you know, drenched in the style of that period, which seems really antiquated now. But certain classic films, I think, will survive for a long time. And I think that's one of those films that will always see another generation of children and adults who can go see it.
So you found yourself on this set. One day, it's a big feature. You've got Francis Ford Coppola, you've got all the young Turks of Hollywood in the late 70s who's got their hands in this someplace. And you're the director of photography. That must have been a pretty good day.
Yeah, I mean, I never really thought of it that way. I mean, for Carroll and I, it was both our first feature films, and, you know, it was a little bit terrifying because we were both convinced that we would all be fired at some point along the way. And we shot in Toronto, and, you know, I had to, you know, get a crew for the first time, and not only that, but find a crew in Toronto, and, you know, I made some good choices. I mean, I had a really good, you know, gaffer and good, you know, grip, but at the same time, I mean, Carroll Ballard is one of these people who doesn't, you know, he really likes to keep the spontaneity of the moment when he's filming, and there's lots of times when he will change his mind and do things, and, you know, there's a lot of sort of grumbling and you know, whinging, as they say in England, on the set about, you know, this bozo director and cameraman don't know what they're doing. And so, you know, you were always sort of surrounded by this feeling that you're a complete idiot and had no clue what you were doing. And
whinging, I love that.
Whinging, yeah, it's a great English term, but it's one of those onomatopoetic terms that sounds like what it means. And
you hear the sound of whinging.
Yeah, and, you know, it was odd, and I ended up hiring a guy as an operator for me who had actually been an assistant for Gordon Willis on a film he had done there, and I kept thinking, well, he was an assistant for him, and he was really good, so he's a good operator, and you know, Carol and I had such a relationship, with each other that, you know, he couldn't understand what we were going for. And I ended up, I mean, I never fired him, but I always sort of would push him off to the side and operate. And it really caused a lot of tension. And I suddenly realized, you know, because I'd never had an operator in my life, and it was difficult for me too. And, you know, because I never grew up in the system of working as an assistant and working my way up. I mean, I went to SC and I filmed films and I continued, you know, so I never followed the system through. So you know, there was a certain gap in my understanding of working with crews that I think, you know, it wasn't like the guy was bad or anything like that. It's just that he wasn't in sync with me, and there was no way that, you know, I should have been more careful about hiring someone instead of saying, oh, he was a great assistant, he must be a good operator. And I remember talking to Gordy about it later, and he goes, he was an assistant. I mean, why would he be a good operator, you know? And I go, yeah, it's true, but I never thought about it that way. I was like, yeah, if you're a good assistant, you'll become a good operator. And so, I mean, there were all these things that were going on, and the fact that Carol would change his mind. And at one point along the film, the producers were sort of, you know, giving us trouble because we were falling behind because Carol would change his mind about things. And so they insisted that we follow through on a certain, you know, really precise way of shooting. Okay, the next day you're going to do scenes such and such and such, and we're going to have a shot list, and we're going to follow through. And so for 2 days, we followed the shot list. We put things together the way they were. And Carol and I went and saw the dailies, and they were the most boring, worst dailies we've ever seen, because it denied Carol of his kind of spontaneity of just responding to the moment. And as a result of that, we just said, well, forget it. We're going to go back to the way we've been making our movies. And, you know, so we just would go and we would do what Carol felt like doing the next day. And it's possible when you have basically a boy and a horse, you know, it was possible to do that. So.
Well, it's tough getting performances out of any animal. I mean, no matter what they are, to get them to really do something that fits in with what the story.
Yeah, but you know, the horse that we used in the main horse we used in the Black Stallion was Cazolet, which is this wonderful Arabian that came from dentist in San Antonio, and Corky Randall, who was the trainer, and whose father had trained all the horses in Ben-Hur, and you know, is just sort of legendary. And Corky trained this horse over a period of, I don't know, 4 or 5 months before we started the film. So it wasn't just sort of a last-minute thing. And there are scenes in the movie that we shot maybe once. I mean, probably the most famous scene in the movie that people always remember is when the boy finally coaxes the horse to come up and eat the seaweed out of his hand. And despite the fact that it looks all spontaneous, the fact is that Corky Randall was just off out of frame a few feet and was coaxing the horse forward and backwards, and you know, getting the horse to do what it was supposed to do. So, I mean, it's one of those really wonderful moments where the great training of the horse and the, you know, the relationship the boy had to the horse, you know, really worked. But I've always had good luck with animals. I don't know. I mean, on Fly Away Home, we had great experience with the geese. I mean, except for the droppings. You know, they were really well trained, and they would. I mean, the thing is, you have to understand the nature of the animals, and that's the key. If you try to make a horse behave like a dog, it's not going to do it. And if you try to make geese behave like cats, they're not going to. I mean, you have to understand what the key is with these animals. Otherwise, you know, you're going to go against character, and you're not going to get anything. So.
Good advice.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you're leading with what they're good at, you're going to get good performances out of the animals, you know.
Almost like actors.
But the one thing about geese is they follow someone that they're trained to follow, and they're always going to follow them. Yeah. And that part wasn't hard at all. And if you look at the movie, if you look at Fly Away Home, that's what the geese did most of the time. They followed Anna Paquin, and they followed the planes because they were trained to follow the planes, and they, you know, it just. It's what they do. So, you know, you're not going to be disappointed as long as they do what they do.
And they do it in formation. That's the cool part of those geese.
No, it's really remarkable. And the only thing that sort of altered what they did was when the helicopter would get too close, they just moved to the other side of the wing. But You know, it's pretty remarkable.
Those shots were helicopter to
Yeah.
to air with the
Well,
airfoil, the glider,
Yeah,
plane?
the ultralights.
Ultralight, yes.
And yeah, so.
Hey,
But I mean, getting back to the Black Stallion, I mean, we shot in Toronto for like 3 months, and then, which was the second half of the movie, the part with Mickey Rooney. And then the first half, which was the shipwreck and the island stuff, we went and we shot in Italy, and we shot at Cinecittà for the shipwreck sequence in a tank there. And then we shot in Sardinia for a really long time. And that movie has a really long shooting schedule, and it's just an example of, you know, if you had a really small crew, which we had in Sardinia, and you have time, and you have a really, you know, small cast, a boy and a horse, for the most part, you know, you can really, you know, you can make it wonderful, but you need time, you know.
So the schedule was about 1.5 years then to shoot?
No, I mean, we shot for, I think, over 120 days in that movie, which, you know, which is, you know, in Hollywood is like some huge production. I mean, on The Patriot, we just shot 102 days or something, and that's like a huge movie. Man in the King was 86 or 88 days. So, but The Black Stallion was more, and yet it's a little movie. But, you know, the advantages of shooting for a long time is that you take advantage of weather and moments, and you know, you also get to know your characters better, and you get to, you know, you get, something comes out of that, an understanding comes out of that. I mean, where you get a rapport with the people you're working with that makes a difference in the end. I mean, especially with children and animals, I think that's really important.
Well, we have a tendency these days, as you say, shoot the schedule rather than the movie, and sometimes the movie.
Well, and the schedule of movies now is always, the AD comes up with a schedule, and the studio laughs at it. So if the schedule is 120 days, they laugh at it until they finally get it down to 80 days, and they make the director promise to do it in 80 days, but everybody knows it's going to be the 120 days that they said in originally. So, I mean, what is a schedule? Is a schedule what an experienced assistant director and, you know, production manager and director all agree is a reasonable amount of time? Or is it what the studio says they're willing to, you know, put out the money for? I mean, it's really, you know, it's unfortunate, but movies have just gotten so expensive that, you know, those factors rule. And the fact that they not only are made, you know, in periods of time, which, you know, it's like everything, it has to be budgeted, but I think the real tragedy is the fact that the post-production schedules are getting so short. I mean, if Apocalypse Now had come out in a schedule that they use today for most films, it would have been a disaster. I mean, you know, because I did, you know, a little bit of pickup shooting and stuff on that, and I saw various versions of that, and a year before it was finally released, it was not, you know, and a year into the editing, because it took 2 years to put it together, it wasn't a very good movie. I mean, it didn't make any sense, and yet in the end it became this wonderful movie. But it wasn't a wonderful movie until they found what they had there. And you know, with really great editors, I mean, Richie Marks and Walter Murch and all those people working on it, it took them time to find it. And it, you know, no matter how brilliant you are, you know, there's a certain wonderfulness that comes from living with the film for a period of time.
So the Black Stallion comes out.
Yeah.
And
well, it didn't actually. What happened is that the Black Stallion took a long time to edit, because the first cut of the Black Stallion was over 5 hours.
Oh, well, that's a big movie.
And so after that, I did a film called More American Graffiti, which was a sequel to American Graffiti. And I mean, it's sort of an odd bird of a film. It didn't do that well, but there, you know, George Lucas was an old friend of mine from USC Film School, and Bill Norton was the director on it. And you know, George had this idea of shooting the film, which is 4 different stories in 4 different camera styles. So we shot one anamorphic, we shot another section of it, you know, 185, and we shot another section, 16mm square frame, which is the Vietnam sequence. And then the 4th story was all, you know, it was like, you know, anamorphic multiple screen. So, you know, it didn't make the movie better, but it certainly, at least when you see it on the screen, I think I've never seen it on TV. It's probably horrible on TV because you have no clue what the differences are. But if you saw it in the theater, it was really pretty interesting. The Vietnam War sequence, which I really love shooting, we shot with 16mm ARRIs and, you know, just handheld and real documentary style. And you know, the odd thing was that when we first did tests blowing it up to 35, we just did it as a square frame in the middle. It looked too good, and so we had to actually put it through generations of prints and negatives to get it to the point where it really looked very rough and grainy
and scratchy.
But the great thing about it was that there's certain things that would happen during the filming of it, you know, in this war sequence, is that, you know, we were doing some scenes that would take place. We do like a whole sequence would be like 2 minutes of these guys on the water, and they're being, you know, shot at and everything, and, you know, we had it all laid out beautifully, and we did this one take, and in the middle of the take, one of the soldiers sort of like bumped into me, and the camera sort of moved and, you know, shakes, and, you know, I'm thinking, oh God, we ruined the take. And in the end, they end up using that take in the film, and they just added the sound of an explosion at that point, and it worked great. It really became a great shot. So, I mean, I've always been one to sort of at least accept the fact that there's a certain amount of serendipity as you're going. I mean, I really like to sort of visualize things as I go along and have an idea of what the film should be like. I mean, you know, when I was at the AFI, I mean, one thing that I didn't mention, I arranged to have an internship with Gordon Willis. And so I went and studied with him on a film that he did, which was not one of his best movies, but was great for me, a film called The People Next Door. And what was great about it was because Gordon was not totally into that movie, I was able to just spend a lot of time asking questions. And I would go through and I would take stills on negative, you know, that we were shooting, and I would go around with I had my meters, my spot meter and my incident meter, and I'd go around and everything that we did, I would just document, and I'd do drawings of all the sets and everything. Wow. And at the time, Michael Chapman was Gordon's operator. And after I'd been there for a while, I mean, you know, Michael Chapman sort of got me behind on the wheels to sort of teach me how to use the wheels and all this stuff. And, you know, after about 2 weeks or so, I remember, you know, Michael Chapman finally coming up to me and sort of saying, well, now did Gordon tell you why he was doing, you know? And he was afraid, either afraid or he never thought to ask Gordon why he was doing things. And it was funny because, you know, I would sort of end up answering questions for Michael Chapman about what Gordon was up to.
Cluing him in on what the real deal was. Oh my goodness.
Which was very funny. And of course, you know, Michael, of course, moved on to become a really great cameraman on his own. So.
But what a terrific introduction for a film student who's to study someone like that.
Yeah, because I would, I mean, I would go and I would ask Gordon why they were shooting, you know, and sometimes he'd be in disagreement with the director and he'd go, it's stupid. I mean, what we really should do is this. And, you know, I mean, Gordon, the one thing I learned from Gordon that, I mean, to this day, more importantly than lighting or camera movement or anything else, is Gordon's concept of point of view. And it's like where you put the camera and why you put the camera there and what the point of view of the movie is. And it's really true. I mean, you really have to, and I don't know if it's something that can be taught so much as it is, I mean, it's one of the reasons why when I get a script, I read it at least 10 times. Because there's a really wonderful film, you probably only get it at the UCLA archives. It's Jean Renoir talking about the Italian method of acting. And the idea of the Italian method is that you give the actors a script and you let them read the script and you just do it over and over again and you stop them as soon as they try to put any emotion in it. And the thinking behind it is that if you start to put emotion into a performance too early, it will be the obvious emotion. And it won't be necessarily the right or the deepest, most subliminal, you know, thought or idea. And, you know, I think you know, from that and from Gordon and reading a script 10 times, if you read a script 10 times, you suddenly have a different impression. I mean, just as an example, I mean, if you took a scene where someone finds out that their mother has died, the obvious thing is they're going to cry. And that's what an actor is going to do the first thing. But if you don't let them cry, you know, eventually they're going to read the words, and the words are going to seep in if they're well written, and you're going to find something else there. And maybe it's something different. I mean, maybe they get mad, maybe they laugh, maybe they get nostalgic, maybe something else happens. And I think it's the same thing with a script, is that when you first read a script, you start making obvious choices about things, and those are not necessarily the best choices. So if you just make yourself read it 10 times, you start to develop an understanding of it in a much deeper, much more you know, profound subconscious way. And I always find that, you know, I always sort of keep track of what I think when I read it the first time. I'll make notes and everything. And then I make notes after the 10th time, and it's almost always different, and it's almost always better. Because, you know, you sort of get an understanding of what a visual point of view should be. I mean, talking about visual style, well, I mean, my third film was a film called Being There. And,
one of my favorites. I love that.
Yeah, I love the movie too. I just saw it last week too, because they showed it. Bill Dill showed it at his class at the AFI.
Walking on water was so cool.
Yeah, and you know, it was really interesting to see, despite the fact that the print was all red because all the greens and blues have been drained out of the print.
Well, another one of those been a victim of
yeah,
time? Oh no.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm sure, you know, I mean, it's not in the negative. I mean, I'm sure you could get a good print out of it, but it just happened to be an old print that was faded. And but the thing was that that film, Hal Ashby, and I mean, here's another story. When I was at USC, one of the things that SC had talked about was the idea of making some movies about people in the movie business. And because I actually had gotten a I'd gotten a scholarship at SC for editing.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, I got it and it was like a teaching assistantship and everything. And so I decided it'd be great to make a film about an editor. So one of the great editors at the time was Hal Ashby, because he had edited In the Heat of the Night and you know, a lot of Norman Jewison's films, and you know, Thomas Crown Affair and everything. And so I was, you know, I went and met Hal Ashby, and we sort of became friends, you know, even though. And in the end, we never ended up making the movie, but we kind of became friends. And I also, you know, knew Haskell Wexler at the time, who was also another one of my mentors. And so when I had finished More American Graffiti, you know, Haskell wasn't available, and I forget what happened, but Hal ended up asking me to shoot Being There. And I had not done I had not really done a Hollywood film, because American Graffiti was shot in San Francisco, a San Francisco crew, and The Black Stallion was shot in Toronto and in Italy, and they hadn't come out, and Hal hadn't really seen anything, but, you know, he just knew from my student films that he just thought I was capable of doing it, so, you know, he asked me to shoot that. And the guiding principle behind Being There, visually, and which is, you know, which carries through on most of the movies I've shot, is that, you know, we came up with a visual point of view, which was, we didn't want to shoot the film as if it was a comedy. We wanted to shoot the film as if it was a film about power and politics, and that if there is any humor in it, which there is, it has to come from Peter Sellers and his juxtapositioning and his relationship to, you know, all the characters in the film.
Being a gardener, as he
Being
was.
a gardener. So it was lit, and it was shot as if we were making, you know, Manchurian Candidate or something. I mean, it was really shot in a very serious, straightforward way. The other thing is that we wanted it to be really simple looking. And by simple, we basically reduced all the lenses to a 40mm and a 75mm lens.
Wow.
And we shot everything flat on. I mean, if you look at the movie, it's all really, I mean, it's almost like the movie is shot in sort of a feeble-minded way, which is what Chance the Gardener was sort of like.
Kind of
and so everything was very
way
simple.
for movement and camera movement.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I have to confess, there's one shot that we shot with a 29mm because we were back in this place and I couldn't get back far enough, and we finally, after much, you know, worry and, you know, sweating, we finally decided to give in and shoot with a 29. But other than that, it was shot with a, you know, with a 40 and a 75.
Lovely. So all the close-ups were the 75.
With 75.
And all the wide shots were.
And we were able to use, you know, we were able to use the 40, you know, for really wide shots because we were shooting in a house that, you know, you could get back 300 feet and, you know, shoot because it was, you know, the Biltmore Estate in Asheville, North Carolina, which
mansion,
is
right?
This incredible 272 room mansion. So. But yeah, and if you look at the film, I mean, you know, there's no reason why anyone watching it is going to say, hey, they only use 2 lenses, or gee, the camera is always simple and parallel. But I think if you have an idea like that, I mean, for an example of a Gordon Willis film, All the President's Men is about small to big. It's all about little tiny miniature things that expand to big. And the idea is that the you know, a word can destroy the presidency. And it's all about the written word, you know, toppling the president of the United States. And if you look at the movie, I mean, it all has these things where you start, you know, there's a shot in the Library of Congress where you start really tight, you know, on Redford and Dustin Hoffman, and you come really back far, and the movie opens up on just, you know, typewriter, bam, these, you know, letters typing. And if you look at that, and, you know, there's a certain subconscious thing that goes on, you know. I mean, you know, other cameramen might talk about colors and other things and compositional elements, but, you know, there are, you know, definitely sort of psychological and subliminal things that do come into the, you know, the feeling of a movie when you make those kind of decisions. And so, you know, the biggest problem, of course, is that every movie that I do, I will get this idea, and I'll have this idea, and you get out there, and it rains, and it's muddy, and the sun's setting, and you have to get the shot, and you go, okay, you know, there's always things that are going to drag you away. But as long as you have these ideas for the movie, and as long as they're right, and as long as you haven't made a stupid decision about what you're going to do, you make a certain contribution to the film that helps tell the story in a certain way.
So when you read the script the first time, let's go back to where you were reading it. You're taking notes, and you're writing down how you might visualize the movie in terms of the detail and these concepts like you're talking about.
No, you know, I just note what I feel about it. I don't really note how I would shoot it when I first read it, and you know, because I'm holding off making those decisions, but it still gives me an indication of how I might shoot it. And you know, I mean, I find that, you know, there may be a couple of things that'll hold true and always be there, but a lot of things will be really different after I read it 10 times. I mean, I think just the way, you know, that Italian method forces an actor to get deeper into themselves before they make an emotional commitment to what that character is doing. I think the same thing happens to you making choices from a visual point of view of how to tell a story.
And then you take this concepts that you have, and from the 10th reading, so you really, you know, kind of got an idea. At that point, are you talking to the production team, the producers, the directors?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
To the art directors to find out how that.
And you know, I mean, in the course of reading it 10 times, I've talked to the director, and I start throwing out ideas, and talk to the production designer, hopefully, and you know, we start to evolve these things together, and hopefully you end up all in sync. I mean, that's the best thing. I mean, I remember when I was at the AFI last week, you know, Bill Dill was asking me about. You know, what do you do when you're in conflict with a director and he wants to do it one way and you want to do it another way? And then, you know, I mean, the best thing is to never get in that situation. And sometimes you do and you can't help it. But, you know, I've been pretty lucky in that most of the films that I've worked on, if I've had a different idea than the director, I usually am in a position where I either respect him enough that I'm willing to trust it. I mean, with Carol Ballard, we both work together where we both just point and grunt. I mean, that's, you know, because we're so in sync and internal about these things that I think we just kind of get along. And there are times when he'll want to, you know, he'll want to do something, and I'll think, I don't know about that. And then we try it, and I go, wow, it's really, This really works.
This worked. So this imagery you're talking about from like wide to tight and constricting it's tough to talk about photographic image or photographic imagery. Do you go to a Jungian source? Do you go to a symbolic source? I mean, do you or just kind of?
I generally go. I mean, my references are usually either photographs or paintings, or other movies. In other words, you sort of look at how stories are told in other movies or, photographs. I mean, I find it really interesting that, and it's something that's occurred to me over the years, is that you can look at not so much movies, but if you look at still photographs by certain photographers, you can recognize their work. I mean, you can look at a Brassai photo and never have seen it before and have a pretty good idea that he took that picture. Or Diane Arbus, who, there's something about her pictures. I mean, the fact that most of them were shot 2 1/4 and are square and usually have, sort of damaged people, and it's really true that there's a certain, because I really think that what you photograph, somehow reveals something about yourself. I mean, it's sort of inevitable that, you're going to expose something about yourself in the way you photograph something. I mean, the way, and what that is, both, is involved with lighting and camera position and camera angles and camera movement and, light, color and all those things. So, yeah, I mean, I like to think that everything I shoot is different and suits the movie, but I also know within my body of work, you can look at it and you will find things that are really me. I mean, and I've never analyzed it enough to put my finger on it. Maybe when I'm 70 and retired and not thinking about that kind of thing. Or, if I'm lucky enough to be Connie Hall when I'm 90 and retired.
Still working.
I'll think of, I'll sort of put the body of work together and look at it and try to figure that out. But
well, let's go back to you were talking about your movies hadn't come out yet. That is.
No, and they all came out at the end of '79. I mean, the 3 movies that I talked about all came out at the end of '79.
Wow.
So suddenly it was like, I'd shot 3 movies that came out between September and December of '79, and they were the first 3 movies I did. And 2 of them got a lot of recognition. I mean, The Black Stallion. Funnily enough, The Black Stallion was shown at the New York Film Festival in the fall of '79, and Janet Maslin, the next day I remember waking up, getting the New York Times, and we'd gone to the screening at, I think it was Alice Tully Hall. I mean, it was like this big screening, and afterwards the audience got up and cheered, and it was really great, and we go up on stage, and we're sitting there, and they're talking, and you can just feel the adoration of the audience about this movie. And, when you have to understand is, my wife, who was there the whole time with our little daughter Emily, who's now 23, but who at the time was a year old, was there the whole time, and I would come home every night and just, it was one disaster after another. It was like just awful, and then we'd have dinner with Carol, and Carol would go, "Oh God," and she was so mad when she finally saw the film and saw how great it was that all she heard was, "This film's a disaster. It's falling apart. It's never going to work. It's one thing went wrong after another." So, here we are. I mean, just, the movie's really good and the audience really liked it and everything. Get up the next morning and Janet Maslin in the New York Times writes this scathing review of the movie. I go, and, eventually all these other reviews came in and they were all very good and people liked it and people went and saw the movie and, it was pretty much of a success. But, 18 years later or whatever it was when we did Fly Away Home, Janet Maslin wrote a wonderful review of Fly Away Home, and in it she sort of referred back to the wonderful Black Stallion. And I don't care if you're, if you're a filmmaker or you're a director of photography or whatever you are, and you're involved in something and you get this scathing review, you're never going to forget it.
Oh no.
And for her to sort of cop out as if she liked the Black Stallion, when in fact I remember her not liking it. So it's just really interesting about things like that. We have a friend who's an actor who went through the same thing where he had done a play on Broadway for which he had gotten a Tony Award and everything, but somebody had written this bad review, and he you know, many years later, it was something with Bob Fosse. This guy was writing a book about Bob Fosse, and he calls him up. And, you know, our friend was able to quote this bad review to him over the phone. Don't you remember you wrote this about me? And it's very funny.
And now I don't want to give you the interview now.
Yeah,
right. Well, I heard some things too, like, oh, that's a De Exterior movie. You know, your Stallion movie, but it was the Black Stallion was terrific. I mean, it did other things, but then you read on the heels of that, you had all this interior movie. I mean, I heard, you know,
well,
kind of.
I didn't. You know, it's pretty hard to get a horse inside for a lot of a movie. Yeah, I mean, all the movies are different. I mean, sometimes you do a movie that's mostly. I mean, Being There is mostly interior.
Mostly interiors, yeah. All kinds of dramatic interior.
The Right Stuff is both interior and exterior. Interior of capsules and planes and hangars, and you know. So I mean, I don't know. What are you supposed to do?
You're supposed to do the assignment. You know, it's Caleb. You're supposed to do whatever the movie calls for.
Oh, I'm not doing that. That's an exterior picture. No, I mean, listen. I think. You know, listen. There's no question that the fact that we took so long shooting the Black Stallion gave us a great advantage in being able to, you know, have good light and good visuals that help tell the story. And, you know, on most movies you don't have that opportunity. So, you know, but yeah, I mean, what's wrong with it?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just the nature of critics seem to they want to categorize you, pigeonhole you, put you into one thing, and not let you have that little area, that little box. And you know, obviously it just.
Well, I actually like being outside. I mean, you know, there's a certain aspect of doing what I do that I also have to give into, which is the fact that I like the adventure of making movies, and I like being able to create something out of nothing. I mean, I love the fact that, like, in The Natural, we did some scenes that we shot one piece here, and somebody looks out a window and it's shot somewhere else, and you know, we shot the interior in Buffalo and the point of view in Venice, California, and another scene in, you know, a whole other place. And I mean, it's sort of the wonderful thing about movies. I mean, on Apocalypse Now, I shot all these inserts of Marty Sheen reading the dossiers, and we shot it on the Napa River, and I had to, I mean, it was one of the great experiences to study Vittorio Storaro's work and match it perfectly so nobody would know that we had shot it on the Napa River instead of in the Philippines. And so, you know, there are all sorts of you know, elements. I mean, we designed a whole turntable so we could create shadows moving around on just simple insert shots, but there's always shadows moving across it, so you always have a certain feeling of the rhythm of the boats. And I mean, all those things are just, you know, you contribute what you can at the moment. And if it happens to be an insert shot and you could just shoot it just sitting there on the ground and it would look fine, and maybe you shake the camera a little bit so it feels like you're on a boat, but wouldn't it be better if you built a turntable and you had the light moving across it, or figured out a way of moving shadows across it? Or, I mean,
so when Mr. Sheen is on the boat looking over all the resumes of all the people that he's going to.
Yeah, if you look at him, he looks much healthier than he did in the rest of the movie.
That was all done in Northern California.
Yeah, it was done on the Napa River, right near Francis's house. So.
Wow! Yeah, well, because it fit in. Aside from the fact that he does look a little healthier.
Yeah. No, he definitely has gained about 20 pounds, and you know, looks a bit different than he did.
But it's still him, so it goes. It plays.
Oh yeah. No. I mean, listen, in the Black Stallion, there's a scene, the scene where they take the horse out and run it around the track at night in the rain. You cut back and forth between Mickey Rooney one night and the next night, which is all cut together in the movie, and he's wearing two different hats, and nobody ever notices. So, you know, I think continuity is over, you know, exaggerated. I mean, you know, if you're really into a movie and you really believe in it. Well, here's another thing. I mean, another one of my ideas about movie making is that, you know, I think there's reality, and I think there's, you know, emotional reality. And, you know, in films, I really feel that you're dealing with, you know, a dramatic and an emotional reality. And if you are in sync with, and you understand the story, you can do outrageous things that, you know, become totally believable to an audience. I mean, if you look at, you know, The End of the Natural, when Robert Redford hits a home run and he hits the lights and they start exploding. I mean, it's the most absurd thing in the world. But because the audience has been taken along and so much wants to believe, you transport them with these, you know, these images of just these sparks flying down because you want that to happen as an audience. And
lights don't
there's
explode
so many
that way.
things. What?
Lights don't explode that way.
No, I mean, but who cares?
Who
I mean,
cares?
that's not the point. You have to know when. I mean, listen, if you'd made a mistake, and you know the audience didn't like Robert Redford and didn't like the story, and you got to that point, people would laugh.
Yeah.
People would laugh. I mean, you see it in movies all the time where people make that mistake of not being in sync with the story they're telling. Now, you know, sometimes it's innocent, and I mean, I've certainly done movies where, you know, what I thought I was doing, the movie didn't turn out as good as, you know, what I thought it was going to be, and so, you know, some of what you've done seems out of place. And so, you know, you kind of have to trust when you're making a movie that it's going to turn out as good as it possibly can, because you have to make certain choices like that. Otherwise, you know, you might as well just, you know, make stupid choices all the time.
So it's 1979. Your movies come out. Your career must have taken another, you know, shift into ultra high gear. Then at that point, things started happening to you. What happened?
Well, actually, what happened then was that after shooting some stuff on you know, with Francis on Apocalypse Now and doing The Black Stallion with him, I mean, he gave me a book to read called The Escape Artist and asked if I'd be interested in directing it, which I said I would. And so I spent, you know, like the next year and a half developing that and directing that. And it was a film with you know, Griffin O'Neill, Ryan O'Neill's son, and Desi Arnaz, and Raul Julia, and Terry Garr, and Joan Hackett.
Good
and
talent.
it's a nice little movie about a boy who wants to be a magician. And, you know, so we did it, but, you know, it was one of these films that, you know, in the end, it, you know, didn't do very well. And, you know, it's one of these things where when you're directing, you know, you totally get involved in this thing, and you know, when it was over, I was Phil Kaufman, who I'd known through the years, was going to do The Right Stuff, and he offered me that movie, and so I said, yeah, I'd like to shoot it. And so I went back from directing, and I went to The Right Stuff. So I spent, you know, it was a really pretty good experience, and I really liked, you know, I liked doing it. But you know, in Hollywood, if you do a film and it's not a big success, then you have trouble. So you know, that was the first movie I directed, and then the second movie, which I did like 7 years later, which is a film called Crusoe, with Aidan Quinn, which is based on Robinson Crusoe, was sort of another one of those experiences. I mean, I got some really good reviews on both of them, but you know, again, they didn't take off, so you know, you sort of get taken to task for that. But
well, it's pretty terrific that you can fall back on your other career then.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you know, I mean, I could always sort of fall back on it, but I mean, I don't really see it as falling back.
No,
I mean,
of course not. I'm teasing.
You know, people would sort of complain to me like, "But you're so good as a cinematographer. Why don't you just shoot and everything?" And you know, I mean, it's true. I mean, I really, you know, the thing is that as a director, the movies I get to make are not of the caliber of the movies I get to do as a cinematographer too. But I mean, if I ever became independently wealthy and I could do anything I wanted, I mean, there are a lot of little movies that I like to make, and part of it is, you know, when I became interested in movies, I mean, I was never interested in Hollywood. I never saw any Hollywood movie I liked. I mean, outside of some of the old, you know, Howard Hawks and you know, some of the early John Ford, and you know, but I mean, I never liked the big spectacles. I mean, the movies I liked when I got involved in making movies were all the French and English New Wave movies. I mean, I loved Truffaut and Godard, and I mean, I liked Fellini, I liked Bergman, I liked, you know, a lot of the French, I mean, the English movies, some of the really early John Schlesinger films, you know, from England, and you know, I mean, some of those really great films that were made that really had this sort of rough style, you know, all the Raoul Coutard films, you know, that, you know, I mean, that's the stuff that I liked, and I never ever saw myself in Hollywood. I mean, I just, you know, I mean, I saw myself making movies, but I never saw myself making the kind of movies I've, you know, come to make. I mean, and it's harder and harder. I mean, I think it was easier in the late 70s, early 80s to find really good projects that I really believed in. And it just seems like it gets harder and harder because, you know, it's become such a committee process. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really difficult to find, you know, individuals that make movies now and have enough power to do it. I mean, you know.
Well, the movies you mentioned are by and large small films compared to the Hollywood product, which
yeah. Although The Right Stuff, I mean, once I did The Right Stuff, I mean, even Being There was a little movie. I mean, it may have had Peter Sellers and Shirley MacLaine and Melvin Douglas and Jack Warden, but I mean, it was still, you know, the story was a little story. I mean, it's a contained, you know, story, and we shot in, I think our schedule was only about 40, 45 days or something.
Really?
Yeah, it wasn't that long. And I remember thinking that's really long for, you know, but, yeah, and, you know, but then, you know, going into The Right Stuff, I mean, it was a huge undertaking because it took place over such a long period of time. There's so many periods of the movie and different characters, and I mean, it involved, you know, I mean, it involved politics, it involved, you know, planes and the desert and the ocean and, you know, outer space and...
Well, it's epic filmmaking.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And I mean, to this day, I'm really proud of that movie because I feel like we really captured a period of time and, you know, we're able to sort of evoke that, you know. You know, and we shot for about 10 months on that movie. I mean, not consecutively, but pretty much, you know, off and on for 10 months. I mean, of which, you know, there was a good 4.5 months of solid shooting plus breaks and then 2 more weeks and breaks and 2 more weeks and that kind of thing. So
we can only get into Cape Canaveral at certain times and places.
Well, we never shot at Cape Canaveral, actually. I mean, we ended up shooting, you know, everything pretty much in San Francisco and then down in the Mojave Desert at Edwards Air Force Base. Mm-hmm. And it helped to have Chuck Yeager as an advisor on the movie.
Oh, yeah.
I'll never forget going there. We were location scouting, and Chuck Yeager was with us, and we had driven up to the test pilot school. And we go inside, and we're all kind of casually dressed the way you'd normally be dressed on a location scout. And we come in, and there's a secretary at the desk, and Yeager says, excuse me, hon, is Colonel Johnson here? She says, well, he's in a class right now. Oh, I see. Well, listen, would you just run down there and tell him that General Yeager's here to see him? She goes, yes, sir. And she runs down the hall, you know, and then we get invited down, and we go into this, and there are all these hotshot pilots who, if you meet on their own, are like really, you know, they're really good, and they know it, and they're pretty arrogant and everything. And suddenly you walk in there, and, you know, this colonel introduces Chuck Yeager, and these guys become 8-year-old boys immediately. It's like, it was really amazing. I mean, to see the kind of respect that he gets from, you know, the people there. Yeah, he's a pretty fascinating person.
You've gotten around those planes like the X-1 then, and it's all little toggle switches and, you know.
Oh yeah, it was really like, cheesy. No, some of the old planes are really...
plane's going to fly.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing for me, because I've always been fascinated by aviation and space travel and everything, and what was great is that we got to fly in a B-29 and in all these old airplanes, and it was really exciting.
It's amazing those planes kept flying. I mean, they were solid planes, but just, wow.
There's this group called the Confederate Air Force that keeps, you know, all these old World War II planes in great shape. And, you know, so, you know, they were able to supply us with some of these planes. We used, it's funny because we used a model B-29 with an X-1 underneath it, you know, for some of the releases on that. And we're filming it. And these guys from somewhere in Ohio who were like great model builders built this beautiful, I mean, it's probably had a 10-foot wingspan B-29 with 4 engines and the X-1 underneath it. The guy had spent, you know, like 3 weeks, you know, just beautiful. goes up, and we take, we're filming it at high, high frame rate, so it looks like a bigger plane than it was, and releases, and jet goes off, and we film it and everything. And it comes down for a landing, and the thing crashed. Oh. And this guy who was, in his 40s and a mature man who had built this thing, just burst into tears. It was like really sad to see this guy really just so upset about the little model that he had designed crashing.
But it worked. I mean,
but it worked great. I mean, it was really sort of amazing. I mean, it's interesting on the movie is that the style of shooting of the planes, not so much the outer space stuff, but all the plane stuff, because you have to remember that Star Wars had come out in 2001, and there was a certain pristine quality to the special effects. And what Phil and myself as well really wanted was a certain grittiness to that period of time. We didn't want, we wanted the idea that when you get in this plane, it might shake itself up, and you never know whether it's going to fly or not. And I remember talking to Yeager about, at Edwards there are all these streets that are named after people, and I remember asking Yeager about it, and I said, well, who are these named after? And he said, oh, they're named after guys who made mistakes. I go, mistakes? And he said, well, yeah, I mean, the guys who crashed and died,
Ooh.
And, you suddenly, at first it sounds really callous, and then you suddenly realize that if you're a test pilot and you don't have the attitude that that guy made a mistake, you'd never get into one of those planes, because in those days, those planes were not designed by computers.
Yeah.
They just said, hey, let's build a flying wing, and they have some idea whether it works, but until they get some poor test pilot to get in it and fly it, they don't know if it's going to fly. And
they didn't know if you hit the speed of sound that you just wouldn't automatically just tear apart yourself, and say nothing of your plane.
I mean, that's the story, I mean, that's really where the space program came from, was, these test pilots were the guys who really put their life on the line, and they had that attitude that they weren't going to make the mistake. Mm-hmm. And I asked Yeager about it, because I was saying, well, in those days you didn't really know without computer design and everything. And he was saying, well, if you're a really good pilot, you should be able to get in the plane, and you should be able to tell when it takes off whether or not it's really going to fly. You should have an idea. I mean, if you don't, then there's something wrong with you. And at least that was his attitude, and that's what kept him going.
Kept him going. You betcha. Well, so wait a second. We've been talking for over an hour.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. It seems like only a few
Well, we've
minutes.
got a lot more to talk about, because this is just the what were we leading, about 1983, 84, something like that? By the
Yeah,
time?
82, 83. Yeah.
83, and we've got a lot more to go to get up to year
Yeah, but
2000.
there's a big gap in there, so it's
okay. We'll see why, and we'll have a little gap right now. How about that?
Okay.
All right,
Sounds
so let's
good.
stop tape. Well, Caleb, we're back. A minor break, and now the action is happening again. In our break, we was reminded us about your stories about getting into the local. That by the time up to making the Black Stallion, you weren't in the Union, and that
right, because I shot outside of the country, and then on More American Graffiti, we were shooting in San Francisco.
Outside the jurisdiction.
Yeah, and actually, at the time after I'd shot the Black Stallion, I came back, and there was a movie that Steve Spielberg was going to make called After School, which Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale had written. And I actually got hired by Steven to shoot the film. And the film never got made, but I was hired and did location scouting, and ended up working 30 days and finally was able to get in the Union without shooting a foot of film. So I just thought that was a wonderful paradox, and that was, you have to understand that through the years I had tried to get in the Union, and at every corner I was stabbed in the back by the Union, and they would promise me one thing and then never do it. And there was a guy who was running the Union at the time, whose name I forget, who was
Herb Aller?
Yeah, Herb Aller.
No, he did a lot of people.
Some bozo who was
Jerry
involved
Smith.
in. Yeah, all those guys.
Yeah.
All those guys. And what would happen is that the really interesting thing was that they would if you wanted to join as a director of photography, which is what I wanted to join as, they would say, well, you really have to work your way up. And, you know, we have openings as assistants now, and you could join as an assistant. And of course, you know, I didn't want to join as an assistant. I didn't see any reason to join. So I would tell my friends who were interested in joining as assistants, and they would call up and they would deny that the writing openings for assistants if you wanted to join as an assistant. But if you wanted to join as a director of photography, they were willing to admit you as an assistant. So, I mean, it was really sort of bizarre. And this went on for years. And finally, you know, Alan Davio and a bunch of other people and I got together and ended up sort of suing them. And then they finally sort of created this open period in which we, you know, they were going to allow people in. And, you know, it was sort of after that that I was finally able to work for Universal for 30 days and become a director of photography in the union without proving that I could do anything. I mean, you know, any bozo off the street could have gone in and been hired by, you know, Universal and done what I did, and they'd be a director of photography. So I thought it was a really wonderful paradox that I would become considered a director of photography within the union without the union having any clue as to whether or not I could shoot anything, because that wasn't important to them. It was more the game that they wanted to play with people than it was the, the quality of work that people do.
Well, I think the current group is much more progressive than
yeah. I mean,
old,
I don't,
old,
you know,
old style.
I don't know. I don't really, you know, as a result of that, I've never really become involved in the union in any way. I mean, I like most of the people I come in contact with, but they're individuals. And as a union, I don't care one way or another. I mean, I appreciate the benefits, and I think that's great. But you know, I don't care one way or another about it. You know.
Well, as things go on, maybe you'll be find it a little more interesting. But
no. I mean, you know, some of my best friends are in the union. You know, it's like, I mean, I'm really good friends with lots of directors of photography, and we're all in the union and everything. And it has nothing to do with that. But I mean, I just have never seen any reason to become involved. That's all. I don't, you know. First of all, I don't have time. But you know, secondly, you know, I just have never had any particular affection for it to think that I would become involved in any way.
Well,
so.
By sharing your story, you are in fact sharing part of yourself with us.
Sure.
This afternoon, so maybe that might be considered a step in that direction. So you never can tell. Okay. And we thank you for that. We were talking about The Right Stuff, and about your adventures on that film and how you got a lot more notoriety and notice for it. Then what happened after that? Then you worked as a director.
Well, yeah. I mean, before that, I did The Escape Artist, and then I went on and shot, you know, The Right Stuff, and then from that I went right on to The Natural, which is the next movie that I did, and you know.
Well, there was symbolism there, the blonde.
Oh yeah, I mean that, you know, to me, that was such a sort of archetypal story that there was so much, you know, it was one of these stories where it was really, you know, almost Jungian in its storytelling. I mean, there were really sort of mythological characters in that, so it sort of made it possible to sort of visually tell the story in sort of, you know, symbolic and mythological ways. I mean, the character that Barbara Hershey plays was always in black, and we would always have a bit of red with her. And the first time you see her, she's standing against a window, and later when Kim Basinger meets Redford, and she's basically the same character that Barbara Hershey played. I mean, she's the same sort of introduction of evil. We put her against a window as well, so she's sort of backlit against the window when she seduces Redford, and you know, he's in bed later. And so, you know, there are all these wonderful elements that you do that are subconscious and, you know, operating on another level than anybody would ever happen to notice when they see the movie. But nonetheless, they're there, and you know, you know, again, it sort of goes to the elements of sort of emotional realities, and you know, telling the story where you could keep upping the ante visually. you know, as the audience got drawn into the story, and you end up, you know, using these sort of visual elements to sort of, you know, make the story as big as it was. I mean, the book that it's based on, you know, The Natural, really took all these, you know, classic, you know, stories from the history of baseball and combine them together. I mean, it's the Black Sox scandal, and, you know, the story of the woman who actually shot the ball players. I mean, that really did exist, and there are all these elements that are all sort of drawn together in, you know, almost a Greek tragedy way. And actually, naturally, it being Robert Redford playing the Natural, you couldn't have the ending that you had in the book, which is actually a tragic ending where he actually takes the bribe and he's banned from baseball. I mean, it really is a different story, but still, it is one of these stories where it really does work as a character who, you know, whose destiny is subverted by the fact that he gets shot and he's forced out of baseball and has to recover and come back after 15 years, and, you know, and then is able to join the majors and prove himself as a ball player at that, you know, at an older age. And, you know, it's a really great story with, you know, wonderful characters. I mean, Richard, you know, Farnsworth, who actually is just nominated this year for Straight Story, was really wonderful in that movie, and Kim Basinger and Redford, and I mean, they're really, really wonderful characters. And Bob Duvall, who plays this sort of evil reporter.
Well, who remembered that you've written a story about it previous, a bad review earlier, or he actually had a good review of him being a phenom pitcher, and then later on he saw him again as the batter, and it just kind of jogged his memory a little bit.
Right.
So there's these little flashback things. Well, so what happened after that? What happened after the...
Oh, you mean after... well, after that I did another movie with Hal Ashby, which is called Slugger's Wife, which, I mean, it was Hal Ashby, you know, doing a movie that was really kind of out of his style. And, you know, I mean, I read the script and I didn't really like it that much, but I really wanted to do it and work with Hal. You know, I didn't mention another film that I did. It was before I did the right. So I did a documentary about the Rolling Stones, which I sort of co-shot with a cameraman named Jerry File. But it was basically a documentary, so I don't really consider it part of my repertoire. But it was sort of fun to travel around with the Rolling Stones for a while. But Hal Ashby directed that, and then when Slugger's Wife came up, I mean, I didn't really like the script, but everybody I would talk to would tell me that, you know, that they really liked the script, and I kept thinking, well, maybe I should really like it. And then, you know, we did it, and, you know, it didn't turn out that great, and nobody really seemed to like it that much, and it was hard to do, and Hal wasn't getting along with Ray Stark, who was the producer, and, you know, there was just a lot of tension on that film, and it was really sort of unpleasant throughout. And you know, it was a script. It was based. I don't know whether it was a play or whether it was just a script that Neil Simon had written. But, you know, Neil Simon's humor and Hal Ashby's humor are totally different. I mean, Hal is really sort of off-center with his humor, and Neil Simon is really right on the mark. And I like Neil Simon's plays, but they're not the kind of thing that Hal Ashby should do, and it just felt that way the whole time we were doing the movie. So, you know, it didn't turn out very well. And after that, I went on and I started. I had gotten to know Robert Towne when he was doing Personal Bests, and I actually came in and did some shooting after they had been on hiatus for a while. And Mike Chapman had shot the movie, but I came in and did a couple of weeks of shooting because Mike wasn't available, and got to know Bob Towne. And when he was going to do Two Jakes, he was going to direct it with, it was supposed to be Jack Nicholson, and then Bob Evans was supposed to play the other Jake. And you should really, you should really get the tape of Bob Evans's autobiography and hear him tell the story, because it's different than I remember it, but it's really interesting to hear Bob Evans's own voice telling the story about two Jakes. But basically, Bob Town got really cold feet about Bob Evans's ability as an actor, and when he tried to, get rid of Bob Evans as the actor, he became aware of Bob Evans, who was also the producer of the movie, and the whole thing just kind of fell apart. And I don't know, after that, I mean, I'd worked on it for 4 or 5 months, and I mean, Richard Silbert was doing the sets. It was really a great team of people, and I was really looking forward to it, but it just wasn't meant to be, and I was just really discouraged after that. And when that sort of fell apart, which it did after we tried to shoot for 2 days, and Paramount finally pulled the plug when they sensed that there was a rat in the whole production somewhere. Andy Bronsberg, who had been the producer on Being There, came to me with this story that, based on Robinson Crusoe, that Waylon Green had written a script for, and he asked me if I'd be interested in directing it, and I read it, and I've always liked that story. I mean, it's a really great story. And I worked with Waylon, and we sort of came up with a story that was, sort of a revisionist Crusoe, where Friday was actually a more formidable character who was from a tribe that was, quite powerful, and not just some weakling who became his man Friday. And Aidan Quinn, we cast Aidan Quinn, and then we shot it in the Seychelles Islands, with some stage work to be done in Yugoslavia, because at the time Yugoslavia was still one country. And I hired a Yugoslavian cameraman who was from Zagreb, a guy named Tomislav Pinter, who was a wonderful cameraman. And but we shot in Belgrade, and we had mostly crew from Belgrade. And we ended up in the Seychelles Islands with a group of people who spoke Serbo-Croatian and kind of halting English, trying to get along and communicate with people on the Seychelles who spoke mostly a patois of French and broken English. And anyway, we had some, I mean, it was a great experience. I mean, it was a really amazing location. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. But we had a number of problems, including bad weather and various sets that got swamped in the ocean, and all sorts of things going on. And then finally, the last day of shooting in the Seychelles, we had hired an underwater cameraman to do these underwater shots, and he unfortunately had to leave early because we kept getting delayed. And his father-in-law was suddenly taken gravely ill, and he had to leave. So I had to do the underwater photography, which I had actually learned how to do on the Black Stallion. And so I did the shots, and when I was finished, I was sort of swimming around under the water, and then pushed my way up and stepped on a stonefish, which is a poisonous fish, which has a venom similar to a cobra. So I ended up, in the hospital there, and then finally in Yugoslavia for 6 days in the hospital, and had to have my foot operated on, and was convinced they were going to cut my foot off and all these things. But I mean, it's a long story I won't go into. But,
well, wait a minute.
But it took a big gap out of the production. So
it's not like it took a big gap out of your foot.
Yeah, it did. I mean, they ended up, having to cut out all the dead tissue that's caused by the poison, and so I was hobbling around for about 12 weeks, and the whole, the film was sort of put on hiatus for a while, and the insurance, had to pay for it. But I was in the hospital in Belgrade for 6 days, and then I had to kind of recuperate for a week or so. And then the rest of the film, I was hobbling around on crutches and in a wheelchair and trying to direct at the same time, and finally got it done. But it was not an easy experience. Then we went and we were in England, and we edited there, and my kids were in the American school there. And even though I was finished the movie, we decided to keep the kids in school till the end of the school year, and so I would just fly back and forth. And I just sort of went back and started doing commercials again because I was just sort of really discouraged about, you know, I didn't particularly want to shoot anymore at that time because of, you know, going from Slugger's Wife and then to the whole insane experience on Two Jakes. You know, I just kind of, and my kids were at an age where I really wanted to spend time around home. So, you know, for a good, you know, 5 years or so, I just did commercials. You know, directed and shot commercials and didn't shoot any features. And
so the kids, they were all living here in Los Angeles?
Yeah, yeah.
And
so they were all living at home. And
so you went into being a commercial director as well as director of photography?
Yeah.
A lot of guys do that these days.
Yeah.
It's,
no, and, you know, I mean, if I were to think back on it, I probably shouldn't have given up so easily, but I was just really discouraged about the kinds of movies that I saw being made and that kind of thing. And then finally, you know, I have a friend, Mike LaBelle, who's a producer, he's done a lot of films with Andy Bergman and always does these comedies. And you know, he really wanted me to do this picture, which eventually became It Could Happen to You, but it was called Cop Tips Waitress, $2 Million. And I really liked the script and I liked the actors. And I just sort of thought, well, this would be an easy movie to go back and start shooting again. So, you know, I went and did that in New York, and I really, really enjoyed it. And then Carol Ballard came to me with Fly Away Home. So by that time I was sort of back thoroughly into shooting, but I was going back and forth. I mean, I'd shoot a movie a year or something, and then finally last year, I mean, the year before I did Message in a Bottle, and then last year I ended up doing, you know, I did Anne and the King in Malaysia for 6 months. And by that time my kids were older and away at school and everything, so it wasn't that hard to do, and my wife could come with me at least for a good deal of the time. And then I went right from that, I did a commercial in Ireland in between, and then I went right from that to The Patriot, and that was another 6 months away from home. So, you know, and I just got back from that about, I don't know, a month ago or so.
Got to be a gypsy in this business to do those.
Yeah, you
features.
do, and you know, I mean, now I'm ready to be at home for a while, and you know, it's easier now that the kids are older, but there was a certain period of time when I really wanted to be around them, and I didn't want to go away for, you know, a long period of time because
So you arranged your life and your career at that time. You were fortunate to be able to do that, but as a commercial director of photography and director. Now, how did you...
Not that I didn't travel doing commercials. I mean, I've been to China and Italy and France and South America and all these other places, but it's not for that.
Sure.
You know, it's for maybe 2 weeks at a time or something. So.
Yeah, but how did you pull yourself into that position? Because, I mean, did you arm yourself with a company? We're here at offices. I mean, did you...
Yeah, I mean, I was working at another company, and the producer that I was working with there, who is now my partner in this company, you know, he and I would, you know, he would produce everything I did. And so we just became really good friends. And then, I mean, he actually decided he wanted to start a company. And I didn't really want to because I didn't want the hassles of having a company. And I'm not really very good about, you know, the business side of things. I mean, I just like to think artistically. So, you know, when he sort of basically created an ultimatum where there was either me going with him and starting this company or staying where I was, I mean, ultimately I decided, you know, I really liked working with him, so I really, you know, figured, well, what the hell, we'll take a chance and do it. And it's been great because basically I just deal with the creative side, and what's really good for me is with other directors, I get to suggest, you know, cameramen who I really like and respect, and, you know, I get involved more on the creative side of things, so I don't really have to think about, you know, the business side of things, and unless things are not going well, and then we both have to put our heads together and figure out. But I mean, we've been, you know, fortunate that, you know, it hasn't been tough, at least most of the time. And so, you know, it just runs on its own, but it always seems to work a little bit better when I'm here. And so it was, you know, when I went away for a whole year, it was difficult, but you know, we have enough people now in the company that it sort of goes on its own. But I mean, it's a side of, I would never have done it on my own. I mean, I really, you know, it's sort of embarrassing for me to have a company, but, you know, it's nice in a lot of ways because I get to try things. I mean, you know, on your own, it's really hard to just say, oh, I'd like to really, you know, shoot some film and try. I mean, but in a company I can do that. I mean, I can just sort of say, oh, first of all, I own a couple of cameras, so I can just sort of go out and test some stuff, and we have accounts at labs, and so, you know, whereas when you're on your own, it's like it's a big deal to have to do everything. But, you know, with a company, you have people who can sort of run around for you and do stuff. So it has its advantages, for sure, as long as you don't become burdened by it to the point where it intrudes on, you know, your creative spirit. And for the most part, it hasn't, so that's been good.
Well, do you approach shooting a commercial in a different fashion than you would approach your feature work?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's, you know, there's something really different about it in that you end up, I mean, you have to figure out, obviously, faster ways of telling stories, but, you know, for me, I find it sort of a wonderful, and, you know, it's sort of proven to be this sort of wonderful experimental ground for trying things, because you can do things visually in a commercial that, you know, we're only beginning to be able to do in features. I mean, it just takes that, because you're dealing with 500 lines as opposed to 2,000 lines, and so, you know, you can do stuff faster and you know, experiment. And plus the fact that you're dealing in video, you know, you can play around with all sort of secondary color corrections, and you can, you know, screw around with the image. And I mean, I know within the ASC there's this, you know, there's a somewhat you know, tough point of view about things being video, and you never know who does what. But I think it's a wonderful, you know, I'm not saying in and of itself it's wonderful, but it's a wonderful ground to experiment and try different things. And you can definitely do it in that area. And, you know, if you witness the, you know, I mean, there are, you know, a number of directors now, I mean, including Spike Jonze, who's nominated for an Academy Award. I mean, a lot of people who've come out of, you know, and David Fincher and other people who've come out of commercials now. I mean, you know, Ridley and Tony Scott all came out of commercials. Alan Parker came out of commercials. I mean, they all came out of that. So it's not, it doesn't have to be the vast wasteland that I think a lot of people think it is. I mean, I think if you have the attitude that it's a really wonderful training ground, I think it's a great way to approach it.
Sure, and you say you get people that you can work with to experiment, to try things, and what you were talking about with film, you know, these things these days, the medium never stays in film. You always go into post-production. You never do any editing for a commercial. In the film, you don't do a moviola anymore, or do you?
Also, no. I mean, I see moviolas, and I think of them as being, you know, these sort of strange sculptures that you know are leftovers from another time period. I mean, I don't know anybody who doesn't edit on Avids anymore, or Lightworks or whatever, but mostly Avids. And I mean, the thing is that even in features now, I mean, even the most simple feature, I mean, you know, Anne and the King and Message in a Bottle are like two pretty old-fashioned stories, and yet there's scenes in there that are completely digital, and you know, you don't necessarily know. I mean, like in Anna and the King, the production designer built these huge sets, but they, despite the fact that they went hugely over budget, they couldn't put roofs on some of the buildings, so those were added digitally.
And you never know watching the movie?
And you never know it. And in, you know, Message in a Bottle, which is a story about two people, you know, basically, you know, it's a love story that's real simple, and you wouldn't even think you would do anything visually in a film, I mean, you know, digitally in a film like that, and yet, you know, there's a scene on a boat at night that we shot against green screen and added the night ocean and sky and everything later. And so, you know, it's become a tool that's just part of your life now. I mean, it just, and in The Patriot, I mean, you know, we did scenes with 800 or 900 people, but that wasn't enough. We needed 2,000 people. So you add the other people behind, and it works great. I mean, it's really wonderful to be able to do that. I mean, to really be able to allow your imagination to not limit the story because of the fact that you can, I mean, first of all, you know, in the case of like The Patriot, where you end up with lots of people, I mean, there's a limit to how many people you can get ready in a certain amount of time, and train so that they can look like they're real soldiers, and, you know, move around in a way that is convenient. I mean, you need a certain number because otherwise you won't have the reality. But you know, if we had to move 5,000 people all the time, I mean, the movie never would have gotten done. Whereas, you know, it's infinitely easier to move 800 people around on a field than it is to move, you know, 5,000.
Sure.
And yet, you know, when you see the movie, there are going to be 4,000 or 5,000 people there and not the 800. And yet you're not going to be aware of it. I mean, it's really amazing. And it's
so from a director of photography point of view, how do you deal with this? First off, you have to know how the techniques work and know how the blue screen works,
sure.
how the green screen works.
No, you really have to be aware of it. But then, you know, you also have, you know, special effects, you know, supervisors who help you. I mean, the thing that I always find is a paradox, and I was talking to Steve Burham about it the other day, is that, you know, every time you shoot blue or green screen, somebody has a different attitude about how you're supposed to expose the green screen. Sometimes it's supposed to be underexposed 2 stops, sometimes it's overexposed, sometimes it's at key, and you just kind of go, okay. I mean, my attitude is, it probably doesn't make any difference, and they all just have their different attitudes, because why would it make a difference if you're shooting it with one special effects supervisor and it's underexposed 2 stops, and the other is at key, and the other is overexposed a stop? I don't get it, but everybody has their attitude, and you just have to kind of deal with that. But you know, the reality is that in the end, the end result is that you're building pieces to go together in a montage of images that go together to create a reality that doesn't exist in front of the camera. And I think it's great. I think there's something really wonderful about that.
Well, special effects have been with us since the Melees brothers.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, you go back and you look at, I mean, even the Lumiere brothers, there were things that they did where they would stop the camera and start it again, and I mean, you know, this is 100 years ago, so. But it's true, I mean, the Voyage to the Moon, I mean, had some wonderful special effects that were created in the camera. But, you know, if you go back, you know, there are photographers in the middle of the 19th century who were doing composite pictures, you know, and creating sort of allegorical pictures and everything with multiple images and everything. So it goes back to the early, you know, the earliest days of photography. People were doing those kind of things. I mean, in the 1850s and 60s, people were making photographs that were basically special effects, where they would create these sort of allegorical stories, usually from Greek myths and, you know, classic, you know, mythological stories, and put them together by putting, you know, shooting one piece here, and putting the negatives together so that they would, you know, create a different kind of reality.
And that's what we're doing these days with different tools.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, to me, it's really, I mean, it's really wonderful. And I mean, you know, I mean, the great thing about, you know, working with Roland on the Patriot is that, you know, he really wants me involved, and, you know, I'm learning a lot doing it, and it's really exciting. And, you know, it's great to be able to, you know, see all these pieces go together and then figure out ways of doing it so that they have a reality that they wouldn't have otherwise.
So where do you see filmmaking going? More of this?
Well, I mean, I think eventually there's no question that images will be recorded in some sort of digital fashion. I mean, how soon it is, I don't know. I mean, you know, I was watching, Steve Burham was doing a transfer for the Texas Instruments projector for Mission from Mars, which they're going to show in some theaters. And, you know, I mean, listen, it's not perfect. It isn't what film does, but, you know, there's no question that at some point in the future, you know, the digital means of recording and projecting is going to be as good as, you know, film. And I mean, listen, the disadvantages are it doesn't have the contrast, it doesn't have the highlights, it doesn't have the deep blacks. You know, it's less forgiving for projection of digital shots. You know, the artifacts are more visible. I mean, there are lots of problems, but, you know, the advantage is that once you do a transfer, it's clean. It doesn't get dirty. It doesn't have some projectionist scratch it. It doesn't have, you know, it doesn't have variations of you know, the chemistry over days or whatever in the processing, or when it goes to some other lab in Europe for the prints there, it doesn't get changed. And, you know, you also can do secondary color correction the way you can on video. So there are things that you could never get on film that you can suddenly create with the image on, on essentially a digital format. So I mean, there are disadvantages in that if you look at it side by side, film is definitely still better. But there's got to be a time, I mean, with the fast development of, digital recording, there will be a time when digital recording will be fast enough. It will be of a high enough quality that, and manipulatable to the point where you can really do a lot of wonderful things. So I mean, listen, film, there's no question that for the next number of years, and I can't tell you how long, film is going to be the most amazing medium. I mean, you can take a camera and go to the top of Mount Everest and you can film that, and you can't do that with digital, you just, not yet. But, and even large format digital photography, I mean, I've seen a lot of pictures. Maybe it's not in the hands of the right artists now, but maybe it's going to take somebody who's got a vision and got an ability to tell that story better than the other people that'll make it great. But, there's no question that the days are numbered. But I can't tell you when. I mean, is it 10 years or 15 years or 20 years? I don't know.
Well, we're visual storytellers. And
yeah, it's all the same. I mean, it's still visual imagery that's telling a story. I mean, that will not change. I mean, there still needs to be someone making those decisions about, I mean, how do you light something in a way that helps tell the story? I mean, there's really is a difference. I mean, if you light something like a Jerry Lewis movie, you're not going to tell the same story that The Godfather tells, with its moody overhead lighting that Gordon Willis used in that film. I mean, there's no question about it. So, you need someone who has, who knows how to, use the visual image to tell the story, to be in charge.
Well, certainly if George Lucas becomes successful with this next Star Wars, that's going to make a business impact on what we do.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've known George for years, and I don't know why he has it in for a cameraman, but I mean, I'm sure just early on he had somebody pull the wool over his eyes and he's going to get back at him. I mean, just like I have my own predilections about things that happen to me. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that we're all the friends of the producers and the directors and everybody else. I mean, certainly, I've never worked on a film where every decision I've made has pretty much been to trying to make the movie better. It's just that sometimes your idea of what makes it better and a producer's idea of what makes it better sometimes differs, but it's always with the good intention of making the movie better. So, but, that's always going to exist. I mean, there are always people who say they want one thing and really want something else.
Well, we've been talking about your long journey from
Johns Hopkins.
Johns Hopkins, and I mean,
from Browning Hawkeye camera.
Yeah, up to and finding emotion in filmmaking, finding the kernel of the emotion that you're trying to photograph. That's always the trick, isn't it? To find out what the essence is, huh?
Yeah, and I don't think I mean, the other thing I have to say is that, I mean, when I say you come up with an idea for the film and you read the script and you immerse yourself in it and come to an understanding, that's not really the end of it, because a story evolves too based upon, I mean, to a great extent, the casting in the film and the way it's being directed. And along the way, you have to become aware of how it's changing. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, in films, when you bring in a certain actor, and an actor will just change the weight of the character they're playing based upon their performance, and you have to be aware of how it ebbs and flows and gets better and gets worse, and and how the storytelling goes, so that you're not left behind sticking to this sort of one-dimensional idea that you have right in the beginning. So I mean, that all that's really important too. And the other thing too is that there's certain intelligent decisions that you make sort of consciously about things, but ultimately I think there are a lot of things that you make, a lot of decisions that you make that are really instinctual, and they're really hard to explain. I mean, the thing I always loved about working with Hal Ashby was that he always trusted, you know, your instincts about things. So, you know, that's the important thing.
Is there any other points that we'd like to communicate to your fellow directors of photography, operator assistant, local members?
No, I mean, I just think, you know, I would say see as many movies as you can, and you know, make yourself as visually aware as you possibly can. I mean, you know, like right now I'm looking outside seeing the sun setting, and it's really beautiful, and I never fail to go anywhere without being aware of the light and the surroundings and what causes it. I mean, if I go to a restaurant or someone's house or something, I mean, it always becomes part of my repertoire of remembering these things and bringing them at some point to whatever I'm doing. So, I mean, I think you really have to be keenly observant. You have to make yourself really, you know, visually literate, either through paintings or photography or other movies, so that, number one, you can converse with the people that you need to communicate with, whether it's a director or a production designer or somebody else on the film. And, you know, learn to listen to your own instincts about things, and you know, understand who you are, because as a human being, you're going to do things a certain way, and they're going to be different than the way anybody else does them. And you know, you have to be, as the Beach Boys would say, you be true to your school, and your school is who you are emotionally and developmentally, and you know, the way you see things. It's going to be different than anybody else, and you know, you have to trust that and believe in it.
Well, sometimes in these interviews, one of your big fans may be watching the background. Howie Block would like to ask a couple questions. Do you have any comments on this, Howie? Do you want to talk to Kaylee for a second?
Yes, I would. But before I do, I've been sitting back there, according to your description, watching the lighting on you go from Jerry Lewis to Godfather, because we're losing the light outside, and it's great. It's great. At any rate, just a couple of questions. On your time off, when you are not working, what are your hobbies? What are your interests? What keeps you going?
Well, I actually like to take black and white photographs, and I like to take pinhole camera photographs, just because I like to do things where I don't have any control over it, where I don't, you know, have a crew, you know, to light things the way I want, and just through serendipity see what happens with, you know, with the images. I mean, you know, you take a pinhole camera and you'll do a 6-second exposure, and you can't look through a viewfinder. You just kind of roughly frame it and just see what happens when it comes out. But yeah, I love doing that. I mean, I love to travel. I mean, I still, if I go anywhere, I'll go to museums and I'll go to places that stimulate me visually. And so, I mean, I never tire of it. And, you know, it's something that I really love to do, and, you know, has always been, you know, an important part of my life, so.
Well, that's not surprising, because it shows in your work.
Oh, thanks.
Just one more thing, in addressing a group of young students, future filmmakers, what is your advice to them?
I would say shoot as much as you can, whether it's stills or movies, and, you know, analyze it and see if it turns out the way you want it, and if it didn't turn out the way you wanted, did it turn out better than you expected? And, you know, I mean, learn from your mistakes. And a lot of times, I mean, you know, I mean, a perfect example is there's a scene in The Natural where the owner of the club comes to Redford and is offering him the money, and you know, and he leaves, and he's going down the hallway, and it's at night, and we had it all lit, and you know, there were 5Ks all along the hallway, you know, coming across, and at the end of the hallway there was a 5K that was set up, and it was aimed up, and nobody tightened it down, and it tilted down and hit the floor, and the light reflected in the floor bounced up and created this sort of wonderful, you know, light and shadow on the back wall. And my gaffer, Gary Holt, you know, saw it and immediately was like, oh, and I said, no, Gary, that's great, you know, and it's, you know, really watch what you're doing, because sometimes misunderstandings and mistakes are the best thing that can happen, and that was one of them. I mean, to this day, I love that shot because of the way that light hits the ground and bounces up. So, and it happens a lot. I mean, you know, somebody will misunderstand what you said and put something in a different way than you expected, and yet somehow it's great. So,
Especially when you planned it that way.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, sometimes you're better than you intend by making mistakes. So, I mean, I'm a big believer in that, and a big believer in instincts and, observation and, trusting when something feels right.
Well, that sounds like great advice. Thank you very much, and I'm
Sure.
going to pass the microphone back to Mr. Nipsey.
Thank you, Howie. It's been a terrific interview. You've been
Good.
very open and giving in your time, and we appreciate it. Caleb, what do you see yourself doing for the next short period of time? What your crystal ball says? More features, more commercials?
Well, I mean, I'm following through on the Patriot because there's a lot of visual
post to do,
effects
yeah.
stuff, and I just want to be around to make sure that it's right. And I'm just going to do some commercials for a while, and then, if I find something I really want to do after that, I mean, yeah, I'd like to shoot something else, but I don't know. I mean, I can't say I know what it is until I see it. So.
Well, I'm sure something fun and exciting will come your way and bring you more adventures in this.
I hope not too soon. Though.
Not too soon?
Yeah.
You're ready to...
I'm enjoying after a year of being away, being at home. So.
Great. Well, in the meantime, then we'll see you in
Okay.
Patriot soon, and we'll see you in all the rest of the movies you'll be making for us.
All right.
Okay. Well, I'll fade out then, and we'll see you later.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Did we fade out?